Dr. Mayla Richardson stood at the edge of the lecture hall, watching her students file in like clockwork. It was a sea of backpacks and earbuds, sleepy eyes and half-open laptops. A typical Tuesday morning at Hawthorne Institute of Technology. But nothing about today felt typical. Today, she had submitted her final dossier for tenure review. 8 years of published research, countless grants, national recognition in biomedical innovation. And yet, she still felt like she was holding her breath. Dr. Richardson, a student with a navy hoodie, hovered at the edge of her vision. Quick question on the protein mapping from last lecture. Mayla shifted gears, switching into professor mode with practiced ease. The student walked away satisfied. But as she returned to her lectern, her heart still beat against the walls of something unspoken. She was the only black woman in her department, the only one in the entire College of Bioengineering, for that matter. She had played by every rule, outworked everyone, mentored, published, reviewed. But she knew enough history to recognize a pattern. And patterns don't break themselves. After class, she walked across the quad, early autumn, gold leaves catching light. She passed the bronze statue of Dr. Eldridge Hawthorne, the school's founder, whose legacy was complicated at best. They called him a pioneer. He called enslaved people assets in his early writings. Still, there he stood, cast in triumph. Meanwhile, Mayla had to triple-check her tone in every email. Her office was tucked on the 3rd floor of the Chandler Science Building, between a lab used for undergraduate chemistry and a copy room with a broken printer. She didn't mind. It was hers. On the wall, a framed diagram from her breakthrough work in neural lattice scaffolding, a print of Katherine Johnson, and a sticky note from a first-gen student that simply read, "You made me believe I belong here." That one stayed, year after year. By noon, she received a calendar invite, Tenure Committee meeting, October 14th, 2 weeks away. Her stomach clenched. She knew how it worked. A closed-door meeting, anonymous votes, followed by a single email. Yes or no. No explanation. No second chances. At 3:30, she met with her department chair, Dr. Ronald Crenshaw. Crenshaw was all bow ties and soft voice. He always said the right things, on paper. "You know, Mayla, the committee is impressed with your trajectory. Very solid publication record. Strong student evaluations." Mayla waited for the but. "There have been some conversations," Crenshaw continued, glancing out the window, "about the tone of your public talks." Mayla tilted her head. "My tone? Your lecture last month on racial disparities in clinical trials? Some felt it veered a bit into activism." There it was. She smiled tightly. "So acknowledging bias in data collection is now activism?" Crenshaw held up his hands. "Just sharing what's been said. You're brilliant, Dr. Richardson. Just stay in the lane." Back in her office, Mayla closed the door and sat down slowly. Stay in the lane. As if she hadn't paved her own with every paper, every late-night lab session, every conference speech in rooms that forgot her name. That night, she called her mother. "Don't let them rattle you," her mother said, voice rich with certainty. "You didn't climb this far to ask permission. Mayla looked at the glowing outline of her manuscript on the laptop. A lifetime of work, a career built in a system not designed for her. And yet, she was still standing. Maybe standing wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to push. 2 days after submitting her dossier, Mayla was invited to speak at a panel titled Diversity in Data Science, hosted by the university's Equity in STEM initiative. The irony was not lost on her. The same institution that quietly flagged her for activism was now showcasing her on promotional flyers. Her face, one of only 2 Black speakers, was centered beneath glowing taglines about progress and belonging. The panel took place in the Richardson Auditorium. No relation, despite what the undergrads joked. It was a beautiful space. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, too many flags. The room filled fast. Graduate students, faculty, even a few administrators pretending to blend in. Mayla shared her data. Racial disparities in medical algorithms, underrepresentation in clinical trials, systemic funding gaps. She made her case carefully, every slide backed by published sources. Still, she noticed the tension in the room, the stiffness of certain faculty faces. One professor coughed loudly during her point about data ownership. Another scrolled through his phone when she mentioned ethical frameworks developed by indigenous scholars. Afterward, a student approached her, brown-skinned, notebook full of furious scribbles. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "Everyone acts like those numbers don't exist, or like they're just bad luck." Mayla smiled. "The numbers are only the beginning. What we do with them, that's the real work." The following morning, she received a note from Crenshaw. "Impressive panel presence. Might consider toning down policy critiques during external events. Our job is to educate, not agitate." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened a new tab and reread the university's Faculty Code of Academic Freedom. It was clear. She had the right to speak, research, publish. But rights didn't stop people from punishing you quietly. Later that week, she met with Dr. Alan Yates, her longtime collaborator. Yates was tenured, white, and known for his affable manner and impeccable publication metrics. They co-authored 2 grant-funded studies and had shared keynote stages. But even Yates looked uncomfortable as they discussed her upcoming review. "I'll be honest, Mayla," he said. "Your research is bulletproof. Your mentorship record, stellar. But you know how these decisions can be. Political." "Political to speak facts?" He gave a pained smile. "Some people think you bring race into science too much." Mayla stared at him. "Race is in science, whether we mention it or not. It's in who gets funded, who gets tested, who gets believed." Yates nodded slowly. "I agree. I just don't sit on the committee." That evening, she walked the perimeter of campus. Long strides, wind in her coat, thoughts boiling. She thought of how many times she'd been told to prove it. She had. Every paper, every peer review, every grant, proof. But the rules kept changing. When she succeeded, the measure of success moved. And still, she played the game. But the game was broken. As the sun dipped behind the administration building, she stopped. Right there, under the brass plaque, engraved with Hawthorne Institute's motto, "Truth, Innovation, Honor." Mayla whispered to herself, Let's see if they honor truth. The tenure file was a fortress of data. Citations, impact factors, grant totals, syllabi, student feedback, letters of recommendation from scholars across the country. All of it curated and indexed. It should have been enough. But Mayla knew the numbers didn't always speak for themselves. Not when bias whispered louder. In the week before the committee meeting, she received 3 separate requests for clarifications on portions of her file. One from HR regarding a conference reimbursement from 2 years ago. One from the dean's office asking her to update a publication link they already had. And one, oddly, from the internal review subcommittee asking her to explain her theoretical framing in a grant-winning article. She sent polite replies, attached receipts, annotated abstracts. But inside, she knew what it was, poking holes, looking for cracks. In the faculty lounge, 2 colleagues debated department gossip over microwaved leftovers. One of them, a senior professor named Dr. Madsen, lowered his voice as Mayla entered. "You hear they're delaying Lopez's review again? He's been here 12 years. Yeah, word is they're waiting him out." Mayla didn't ask. She didn't have to. Lopez was the only other faculty of color in STEM above the associate level. Back in her office, Mayla reread the policy documents, officially. Tenure decisions were based on 3 pillars: research, teaching, service. Unofficially, there was a 4th: fit. Nobody could define it, but everyone knew when someone didn't. Her phone buzzed. A message from a former student, now in med school. "Saw your name in the new AI ethics paper. You taught us all this before it was trendy. Just wanted to say thanks. You still inspire me." Mayla stared at the message. That student had struggled, had almost dropped out. Now she was about to become the first doctor in her family. And she thought of all the students like her. Students who needed not just content, but representation. Who needed to see someone like Mayla standing at the front of the room, not shrinking, not apologizing. Friday afternoon, Crenshaw stopped by unannounced. "Just wanted to say good luck next week," he said, leaning in the doorway. Mayla nodded. "Thanks." He hesitated. "You've done well here. Regardless of what happens, you've made a real contribution." She raised an eyebrow. "Regardless of what happens?" Crenshaw chuckled nervously. "You know how these things are. Politics, personalities, timing." Mayla met his eyes. "No, what I know is I've exceeded every metric you gave me. So if I don't get tenure, it's not about my record. It's about your comfort." He didn't respond, just gave a nod that meant nothing and walked away. Mayla closed the door and stood in silence. There were no more revisions left to make, no more data to add. She had laid the foundation, built the walls, reinforced the roof. Now all that remained was to see who tried to tear it down. October 14th. The date had arrived. The tenure committee met at noon behind the polished oak doors of Conference Room B, just above the provost's suite. No one but committee members were allowed. No advocates, no observers. Certainly not the person whose life would be reshaped by what happened inside. Mayla walked campus restlessly. She passed her own classroom, but didn't go in. She walked past the research quad, the reflecting pool, the breezeway near the memorial wall. Every building felt charged. Too bright, too quiet. By 12:40 p.m., they were still inside. She imagined them there, folders open, her name being said again and again, her face flickering on a shared screen. How many yes votes would it take? How many unspoken, "but is she one of us?" would outweigh the citations and the grants? Back in her office, she kept the blinds drawn and the lights low. She refused to check email. Not yet. She waited. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the knock. Carmen, the administrative assistant, her face unreadable. "Dr. Richardson, the provost would like to see you." Mayla stood. The hallway walk felt eternal. Provost Lake sat behind a desk far larger than necessary. A print of the school seal glared from behind him. He gestured politely. "Have a seat." Mayla didn't. Lake folded his hands. "Thank you for your patience. We've reviewed your case thoroughly. I want to acknowledge the excellence of your file, your accomplishments." Mayla said nothing. She knew the rhythm of these meetings. Praise before the blow. Lake continued. "Unfortunately, the committee has decided not to recommend tenure at this time." He paused. The vote was close. That phrase again. A blade in velvet. Mayla stared. She didn't blink, didn't cry, just absorbed the words like concrete absorbs rain. "May I ask for the rationale?" Lake shifted. The committee raised concerns about alignment with departmental culture, questions about long-term fit. Fit, of course, not her scholarship, not her teaching, her presence, her difference. She turned to leave. Lake added quickly, "You're welcome to reapply next cycle should your contract be extended." Mayla looked back. You can't replant a tree and pretend it didn't grow. And with that, she walked out. Outside, the sky had darkened. A storm was coming. Fitting. She stood on the steps and finally checked her phone. Text messages. Dozens. Students. Former advisees. One from a colleague who simply said, "I'm sorry. You deserved better." Mayla walked back to her building slowly. Her office felt colder than usual. She sat down. Then she opened a blank document. Title, "What the System Said No To." She began typing. Not for the committee. Not for the provost. For everyone who'd ever been told they didn't fit. A story broke before she was ready. 3 days after the committee's decision, a student-run newsletter published a front-page piece. Tenure denied. Race and recognition at Hawthorne Tech. The piece wasn't subtle. It named names. It quoted anonymous sources. It asked questions the administration wasn't prepared to answer. How many black women in STEM have received tenure at Hawthorne in the last 20 years? Why are terms like fit and culture never defined? What is the cost of excellence when the rules shift to protect the status quo? Mayla hadn't spoken publicly, but she didn't need to. The silence from the university said plenty. So did the noise from the students. Her inbox filled with messages. You taught us how to challenge data. Now we're challenging yours. We see you. We stand with you. If they don't want your brilliance, someone else will. Even faculty began whispering support. Behind closed doors, of course. One colleague slipped a note under her office door. "We know what this is. Some of us just aren't brave enough to say it out loud, yet." And then came the media. Regional news stations started calling. Requests for comment. Invitations to speak. Mayla declined them all, for now. Instead, she returned to her lab. The space felt the same, but she didn't. She powered up the microscope, reviewed notes from a paused project. She had poured herself into research for years. The work still mattered, even if the gatekeepers pretended otherwise. By Friday, she agreed to meet one journalist, someone local, a former student, now working at a respected science publication. They met at a quiet cafe near campus. Mayla sat across the table, tea in hand. "Off the record," she began. "They didn't deny me for my work. They denied me for making them uncomfortable." The journalist didn't take notes, just listened. "The institution rewards quiet excellence. I was never quiet, and I don't plan to start." That quote made it into print anyway. And once it did, everything changed. The article went viral in academic Twitter. #paper sealing trended for 48 hours. Faculty from other universities chimed in. Same story, different school. It's always not the right time when we show up prepared. Gatekeeping dressed in committee votes. Mayla watched it unfold with cautious awe. Not for the attention, for the resonance. She had cracked something open, and others were stepping through. Still, she knew what would come next. Retaliation, pressure, damage control disguised as outreach. On Sunday, she received an email from the provost's office. "We understand you face disappointment. We'd like to schedule a conversation about your future here at Hawthorne." Mayla didn't reply right away. Instead, she opened her browser, typed 4 words into a search bar: postdoctoral fellowships, racial equity. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in days, she smiled. Because whatever it was, she would choose it, not them. A meeting with the provost was set for Wednesday. Mayla arrived early, not out of eagerness, but precision. She wore navy instead of black. Confidence, not mourning. No one was going to mistake this meeting for a concession. Provost Lake's assistant led her into a new room. Not the usual conference table, not even his office. Just a windowless boardroom with beige walls and a carafe of untouched coffee. He was already seated. "Dr. Richardson, thank you for coming." She sat across from him. No notebook, no laptop, just presence. Lake smiled in that practiced way. "We've been reflecting on recent events. It's clear your case has generated meaningful conversation, internally and externally." She stayed silent. "We're considering the possibility of inviting you to reapply next year, with departmental mentorship to align expectations." Mayla laughed. Once. Not out of amusement, out of disbelief. "You want me to start over?" Lake folded his hands. "We believe in second chances." Mayla leaned forward. "Then why didn't you believe in the first one?" Silence. He didn't answer. He wouldn't. "Let me be clear," she continued. "You didn't deny me for lack of merit. You denied me because I named the architecture of the system you benefit from. And now you're offering me mentorship?" Lake's smile faltered. "I think we're done here." "You were done before I walked in." She stood and walked out. The hallway outside felt colder, but her spine felt straighter. She called her mother on the walk back to her office. They tried to repackage the no as a favor. Her mother exhaled. Let them keep their room with no windows. Thou build something with light. By the end of the week, her inbox held 5 invitations to speak at national conferences. One from an Ivy League, another from a major biomedical foundation. They didn't want to mentor her. They wanted her voice, her truth. Her fire. Mayla began outlining a public talk, not about tenure, about the pipeline, about the ways Black scholars are filtered, reshaped, and sometimes erased before they can reshape the fields they trained in. She titled the lecture, Decorated, Then Denied. As she wrote, she felt the edge of grief again, not for her job, for what it could have meant, for the first-gen student who wouldn't see her name on the department door next year, for the colleague who stayed silent even though he knew, for the pipeline with teeth. But she also felt something else, a strange, growing clarity. She had been waiting for validation from a system that was never built to recognize her. But the truth was, she had outgrown the room. The letter dropped on a Tuesday morning, posted on her personal blog, shared on her social media, forwarded through faculty listservs and Slack groups across the country. An open letter to the institutions that reward silence over substance. It began with a line that cut through the academic veneer. You asked me to shrink so I could stay. I chose to stand so others could see. She told the story in full. 8 years of work, the metrics, the moving goalposts, the silence behind closed doors, the coded language of rejection. You said I was not a fit, but I fit the grants you cashed, the students I mentored, the panels you promoted. What you meant was, I did not mirror you. The letter went viral within hours. By nightfall, it had been read by over 80,000 people. News outlets picked it up. So did tenured faculty from around the country. Former students, public intellectuals, activists, and even some sitting deans. Emails flooded her inbox. This is the letter I never dared to write. You said it all, and you said it for many of us. Your courage is reshaping the path for those behind you. Of course, not everyone applauded. One anonymous email read, "Enjoy your moment. Just don't expect a second chance." She smiled at that one, because a second chance implied she'd missed something the first time. She hadn't. She had simply been too much for their comfort, and exactly enough for her purpose. A week later, she was invited to keynote the annual Coalition for Equity in Higher Education Summit. She titled her talk, Not Denied, Just Reassigned. Her speech opened like this: They closed one door, and I took that door off its hinges. Because behind it, I found hundreds more waiting to walk through. The crowd rose before she finished her second paragraph. Not for performance, for recognition. They weren't clapping for a victim. They were clapping for someone who told the truth and lived to keep telling it. Mayla stayed at the summit for 2 days. In every hallway she walked, someone stopped her. An adjunct, a grad student, a department chair from a school in Detroit. They all said the same thing. You're naming what they pretend isn't happening. And slowly, she began to see it. Her story wasn't rare. It was just rarely told, because most people couldn't afford the consequences of saying it out loud. But she had said it. She had survived it. And she wasn't done. Months passed. Winter came to campus. Snow blanketed the quad where Mayla used to walk between lectures. The Hawthorne Institute rolled on, as institutions do. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Because the letter didn't just go viral. It took root. Students demanded transparency in tenure review processes. Faculty unions referenced her letter in bargaining talks. Departments from peer institutions cited her case during diversity audits. A small liberal arts college in Illinois rewrote their tenure language to eliminate vague language like fit. A university in Oregon created a permanent committee to evaluate racial bias in internal hiring. And Hawthorne? They stayed quiet. But their silence wasn't the end. It was fuel. Mayla had joined a visiting fellowship in Boston, a post often reserved for retired deans or published theorists. She was both and neither, but they wanted her, not despite the noise, because of it. At her first seminar, she opened with the same words from her keynote. The Academy cannot ask us to be excellent and obedient at the same time. Students leaned in. Some nodded. One, a quiet undergrad named Elena, raised her hand. "How did you not give up?" Mayla paused. "I did, more than once. But the truth kept showing up. So I did too." Back at her new office, she curated a reading list titled Structures and Shadows, What the Data Doesn't Say. She assigned her students case studies from real tenure files. Anonymized, patterned, painful. "This is not to discourage you," she told them. "It's to prepare you. Because what you can name, you can face." Later that month, she was approached to help launch a national advocacy project. The Paper Ceiling Initiative, a platform to track bias in tenure and promotion decisions. Anonymized stories, statistical trends, legislative recommendations. She agreed immediately. It was everything she had once tried to avoid. But now, she understood. Avoidance was not safety. It was erasure. One night, after a long day of meetings, she opened her inbox. A single email stood out. Subject, "From one of yours." Inside, "You taught me to see myself as a researcher, not a diversity quota. I just got into my PhD program. I carry your voice into every room that wasn't built for me." Mayla exhaled slowly. She didn't reply. Not yet. She just sat in the glow of her screen, quiet, grateful, determined. The ceiling might be made of paper, but paper cuts deep, and it spreads. By spring, Mayla was no longer just a visiting scholar. She was a voice, invited to panels, cited in articles, respected in rooms she had once been denied entry to. But she hadn't forgotten where she came from, or who had closed the door. An invitation arrived from Hawthorne, a soft one, cloaked in neutrality. The College of Bioengineering invites you to participate in a roundtable on inclusive excellence. No mention of her name, no mention of the letter, no mention of the tenure denial, just an opportunity to help them move forward. Mayla hesitated. Was it worth going back? Giving them the appearance of healing without accountability? But something pulled at her. not revenge. Responsibility. She said yes. Not for them, for the students still there, for the young scholar who sat in her old office now, wondering if she should dim her light. The round table was staged in Hawthorne's newest event hall. Modern, glassy, polished. Mayla arrived early. She sat across from Crenshaw, still in his bow tie, still looking everywhere but at her. "Dr. Richardson," he offered with a nod. She nodded back. "Still fitting the culture?" His smile flickered. He didn't answer. The moderator welcomed them, talked about bridging divides and shared growth, then turned to Mayla. "What advice would you give to institutions trying to do better?" She took a deep breath, then spoke. "Stop trying to save face. Start saving people. Stop hiding behind the process when the process protects bias. Name what you're afraid of. Voices that challenge the architecture, not just paint the walls." The room was silent. No applause, just stillness and clarity. Afterward, a student approached. Black, nervous, brilliant eyes. "How did you keep going?" Mayla smiled. "I stopped waiting for the gatekeepers to open the door. I became one, a different kind." That night, she wrote in her journal, "I was never asking for permission. I was announcing my arrival." She closed the notebook, looked out the hotel window at the school where she had given so much, and took it back. The Paper Ceiling Initiative launched officially that summer. Backed by 3 universities, 2 national foundations, and a coalition of early career scholars who were tired of whispering in back rooms. Mayla was its inaugural director. Her mission was simple: make the invisible visible, and make visibility lead to change. They gathered stories from across the country. Professors denied tenure after glowing reviews. Adjuncts with groundbreaking research passed over for permanent posts. Scholars of color who were used for brochures but not promoted. They compiled data, created a national map of inequities, built a toolkit for institutions ready to confront, not just perform, inclusion. They called it the blueprint. One day, Mayla received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single printed message: "You'll never know how many of us you made brave." She was invited to speak at graduation for her new university. At first, she declined. But the student body president, an engineering major who had quoted her open letter in his scholarship essay, insisted. So she took the stage. No pomp, just her voice. Some ceilings are made of glass, others are paper. The paper ones are harder to see because they're built from silence, from wait your turn, from don't rock the boat. But here's the secret: paper burns, and we carry the matches. The audience rose before she even stepped down, not just out of celebration, out of recognition that what she had done wasn't just survive. She had rewritten the rules. In the fall, she started a new course, Systems of Power in Scientific Inquiry. First session, she walked into a room filled to capacity. Some students were sitting on the floor. She wrote one sentence on the board: "You belong in every room you're told you don't." And under it, "Truth is not neutral. It is a choice." That night, she sat in her new office. No broken printer down the hall. No whispered warnings. Just space, light, and shelves of books with spines like armor. She picked up a fresh notebook, wrote across the first page: "Paper cuts, Paper burns, but paper can also build. Blueprints, letters, declarations. This time, I write the architecture. She signed her name and kept going.